Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect Podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
And I'm Sam Hughes.
All right. We're back with another Star Wars episode.
Dun, 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 dun. Yes.
Was that supposed to be Star Wars music?
Yeah, that's like the whatever.
Sounded more like Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I was giving Indiana Jones.
No, it wasn't. I promise you it wasn't.
Okay.
Although now it could have been. But anyway.
Go back and check the tape, folks, and let us know what you think. We're closing the fifth year
Yes.
of the podcast.
Yes.
This is our fifth installment of Star Wars. Now, Star Wars Episode 5 is still my absolute favorite movie.
Oh, I see.
Of the series.
Well played.
So is this going to be the best podcast? Do we need to end on a cliffhanger?
Maybe we do.
We kind of will in a way, sort of.
Yeah.
I'm going to get
It's like
frozen.
a big announcement at the end of this episode.
Do we have announcements?
We do.
Does Disney have announcements?
No.
Okay.
No. I meant like us personally as a podcast.
Oh, yes, I see. Yes,
not
yes.
Star Wars stuff.
Oh, gotcha.
But anyway, this was kind of a bit of a down year for Star Wars.
Yeah.
Not a lot of new stuff came out. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like Marvel. Like Marvel had one movie this year and a couple TV projects. I think everyone's trying to figure out like what do these giant megalith franchises actually go. That's kind of a little bit what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
So we are going to do some quick recaps of the final season of The Bad Batch, Tales of the Empire, and The Acolyte, the only live action show that came out this year. Well, I take that back. There is another one that has come out, but we're recording this the day after it's released. So we'll talk about it next year. We've got obviously Sam back with us again. Marco's over there. We might jump on the mic from time to time and weigh in and give his opinion.
He has opinions
as well.
Yes.
But yeah, like we'll get into this. We'll talk about those, and we're talking about what's next for Star Wars because there's some projects that are coming that we know of, and there's also a lot of shrugging shoulders emoji.
We were so confident 2-3 years ago. We felt like we had a path.
Did.
We knew where we were going. Now we're not so confident.
Now no one knows. I mean, no, there still is not an official movie on the horizon. There's one more or less solidly locked in gelatin right now.
Okay.
But still not 100%.
We said that last year and the year before.
Yeah.
I know.
We're really confident.
All right, we got to dive in.
So we'll talk a little bit about
We got to dive in.
all that, plus we'll talk about our general feelings on Star Wars and whether all of this craziness has changed our opinion on the franchise. If we should even continue to do these episodes every year.
Oh, come on now.
Yeah, we will.
Come on.
Of course
now.
we will. Because
that was just too bold.
Why not?
Too far off the cliff there.
For reasons that'll be explained later, for one last time, it's time to plug in and get connected. Let's get into it here. A little Star Wars Nerdfest Episode 5. Let's talk about the stuff that came out this year. These first two are more or less for Sam and I, the only ones who've actually watched these because we're such suckers. We check out everything, even the more minor animated projects. Final season of The Bad Batch. What were your thoughts on this? So this, for anybody who doesn't know, The Bad Batch took place after the Clone Wars and followed a group of clone troopers known as the Bad Batch because they weren't quite normal clones. They were a little off. The cloning process didn't quite work as well. But they were their own little squad. They were introduced during the last season of the Clone Wars cartoon, and they have now their own spin-off series where they're trying to figure out how to survive in a galaxy where everything went crazy and all the other clones are now, dominated by the Empire and under the thrall of the Empire.
Yes, right. And how many total seasons?
Three seasons total. I mean, it's a short, quick watch.
Yep.
And this last season basically covered essentially kind of a build up to, what happened next with the Empire, and also incorporated some stuff once again from the classic Timothy Zahn Thrawn books. You got to see Mount Tantus, which is a cloning facility that the Emperor was using during that time. Someone's trying to revitalize it and do new cloning experiments, which I'll get to more of that in a moment. And the Bad Batch has to rescue their young sister, I guess, like
Omega?
clone sister Omega,
Yeah.
who's been captured and imprisoned at Tantus. While also still again trying to figure out how they can escape from the Empire into the ethos of the of the galaxy.
Yes.
So Sam, what was your opinion on the final season?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I honestly, I think, I probably could have just been fine with one season personally, just because just by plugging in context clues, you know, we know where things are going. We know what the Empire was very in bed with cloning and things like that. And, you know, how somehow Palpatine has returned, you know, that kind of just like, it like happened because they made it happen. And now this was essentially just like plot hole filler for that. I liked it. I mean, it wasn't my favorite. But yeah, you're right. Like it was Star Wars content and I'm here to consume it. So
yeah, same here. I mean, I enjoy the show. Some of the same good animation that we had during the Clone Wars era. I thought the show actually did get better over time. Like, I mean, you know, I got very invested in the characters. There was a major character death leading into this season that was, you know, that was pretty dramatic. And I did actually care, like, what was going to happen to Omega and where do they go next. Now, granted, we also have never seen these characters in anywhere else since, and I'm sure maybe there's plans to incorporate them at some point somehow. But I'm also like, I'm kind of done with the Clone Wars era stuff now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We had the fantastic cartoon. This was kind of an unnecessary tack on that worked, but wasn't something anyone was clamoring for, I don't think.
The arc? We didn't need this.
I don't need any more of this stuff. I get it. I get what happened with the clones in the Clone Wars era. I'm fine with that. To your point about Palpatine, the whole thing is, yes, I do feel like Star Wars, the folks that are running the Star Wars show are desperately trying to figure out how to make the rise of Skywalker make sense. Or Palpatine's return. Because it's been a running joke. The whole somehow Palpatine returned it's been a meme, it's been a running joke ever since that movie came out of like, wait a minute, so the big bad of the original trilogy, who was not seen or heard from or even mentioned in the first two movies of the sequel trilogy, is now back to be the bad guy in the last one.
Yeah.
And I feel like between this and the stuff we're starting to get in The Mandalorian and some of the new stuff where there's been cloning introduced there is all about trying to retcon and explain how he came back. And granted, this is also another story kind of plugged. I find it fascinating that even though Disney wiped out what's now the Legends universe, the original Star Wars expanded universe, which was meant to be canonical Star Wars stories taking place after the original trilogy, before Lucas came back and decided to go start playing with it again. They wiped all that out and said, no, none of that happened because we want to make our own stories. And yet they're constantly grabbing stuff from that old universe and throwing it into their stuff and saying, yeah, we like that. We're throwing it in there.
Piecemeal.
There was a storyline. It was a comic book series called Dark Empire, where Luke intentionally turns to the dark side in order to understand more about that side of the Force and how Siths operated in order to become a better Jedi. And a cloned, resurrected Emperor appears in that too. So that feels like a lot of how we got to somehow Palpatine returned. And this is, again, it was another example where I feel like that kind of does the show a bit of a disservice when instead of just telling a cool story about these interesting set of clones, we're like, yeah, but it has to have something to do with everything else. Let's make this part of this story of why Palpatine's back.
And so how do we see that in this, since I didn't see the show?
Essentially, I mean, we're getting a lot of stuff about cloning stuff going on, even though the Clone Wars are over technically at this point, and the Empire is now formed, and the clones were essentially being pushed aside. And we've seen glimpses of that in some other shows like Mandalorian and stuff too, where like the clones basically got pushed out and like, no, we're replacing you. We don't, we don't even like you. We're replacing you with the stormtroopers essentially.
They're the redheaded stepchild.
Exactly. So they got shoved aside, and so this was kind of a way of suggesting like, all right, well, they still found the cloning process to be potentially valuable. And more importantly, they were trying to figure out how to make clones that were also Force sensitive and could use the Force. Again, presumably with the idea that at some point they were to recreate the Emperor and bring him back. That the Emperor was already planning this as like a contingency plan for if something happens to me, you can clone me and still give me Force powers and I'm ready to roll again. So like Omega, the girl apparently was Force sensitive and had the proper midi-chlorian count, because we're still talking about that apparently. To be someone that they were interested in potentially using her to help ramp up the cloning program. So yeah. That's pretty much all you need to know about it.
I got it. There you go.
All right. Anything else to say on the Bad Batch, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was nice plot filler, I think, but just I feel like it's just one of those like context clues that like we as like true Star Wars fans, like viewers, like knew, like we knew what was going on. They were in the the cloning facilities and they were doing a lot of investigation about that, and I just felt like you could put the puzzle pieces together. So I didn't necessarily need 2 additional seasons. I was okay consuming it, like I said. But in my opinion, that could have just been like a short thing, like a one-off, and then just, okay, cool, we get it, we understand. Here's what happened to the Bad Batch, and they found this person. They became essentially fathers and like babysat this girl as she decided to like do good things and get in like the way of things.
I will say I would like to see more of her.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I would love to see her pop up maybe in live action and see who they've cast for her or something. You know, like I think she would be an interesting character to potentially follow and see what happened to her after the fact. But,
Yeah.
But again, also I don't want it to be like, all right, let's do the next series set just after the Bad Batch of Omega. You know,
like. I think it was really cool to
fill in that extra 3 weeks that we're missing between that and like, the Obi-Wan series or something or whatever's missing.
Was there an overbuy on merch that they needed to keep this season going?
I don't think so.
I'm kidding.
I don't know.
Kidding.
I mean, yeah, it's they did it for the sake of doing it, I guess. And it's one of those things. If you're a Star Wars completist, or if you absolutely love the Clone Wars cartoon, which I do highly recommend, fine, check it out. If you enjoyed seeing the Bad Batch in that show and want to know what happened to them, check it out. Otherwise, I think it's skippable. You don't have to have seen this to understand anything else.
Yeah, I think I've always just really enjoyed watching content that comes out like post Order 66, because that was such a huge tumultuous event that just to see like how each person was impacted by that, and that's we saw those clone troopers who were kind of defects. They were affected by that, and that was really interesting to see their process. And like thinking forward, like of Tales of the Empire, like we see from some former Jedi like perspectives on like what they did to like adapt. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I'd be fine with more, post, like right after post Order 60. And we have received a lot of content like that. Like the video game is very much that, and Rebels was that.
My wife just gave me permission to order a PS5 as a Christmas gift for myself.
Yes.
And one of the first games I ordered was Fallen Order.
Yeah,
I've been desperate to play this game, and I'm just like, I have to get a PlayStation to play this.
It's very good.
Right.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Okay, so then let's talk quickly about Tales of the Empire. So this was a companion piece to Tales of the Jedi, which were a series of 6 short animated, episodes that one explored the backstory for Ahsoka and what's his name? Dooku.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 that were explored in Tales of the Jedi. And now we got Tales of the Empire, which gave us some backstory for Morgan Elsbeth, who was featured in the Ahsoka series, as well as Barriss Offee, who, again, you had to have been a student of the other animated stuff.
Yeah.
She was a character.
She
was a character
unaware of this character
who popped up quite a bit within the Clone Wars cartoon when we got to meet a lot more of the Jedi during that period of time. And we found out what happened to her post Order 66 when she essentially sold herself to become one of the
Inquisitors.
The Inquisitors, yes. And we got to see a little bit of like what happens behind the scenes with the Inquisitors, how they brought in former Jedi who they did not slaughter during Order 66, or those who devoted themselves to the Empire, or at least were willing to give it a shot. She does it in redeeming herself, getting out and
nice little arc,
trying to do something important at the end. Morgan Elsbeth's story, I mean, that one was pretty straightforward. It was just like
a
explaining
villain origin story.
Yeah, just a villain,
and a builder at the same time.
This stuff was good. It's nothing groundbreaking here. It really is very much for the devotees, for the folks that are like, man, I want to know more. I saw a character. I want to know more about what happened to them. Let's tell these little short stories, giving them a little more context. Any thoughts on Tales of the Empire?
I mean, it was just kind of, I remember from Ahsoka, like we had learned she was like of the Night Sister, like coven. But just to see that she was in a very oppressed area that was being attacked by General Grievous and his droids. So, just to kind of see that. I didn't necessarily care too much about her path, her story. But yeah, like I remember when I got to the next section of, it was 3 and 3, so it was like 6 total. When I got to Barriss's story, I was like, oh, that backstabber, because she totally threw Ahsoka under the bus in Clone Wars.
Yes.
But just kind of seeing her arc and just thinking too. I mean, not that we've definitely not seen too many. I mean, I think you probably see it a lot. You will see it a lot in Fallen Order. People who were like, okay, I have to join the Inquisitors because I have to adapt if I want to stay alive.
Right.
But then like seeing the toll that takes on people and just the bloodlust that these Inquisitors who were so quick to like completely like reform or deform or like whatever. They just completely like became awful people.
Right.
Just like her like feeling a little human still, or still having some of that like Jedi like empathy and redeeming herself was nice.
Yeah. I do appreciate a little more context about the Inquisitors because when we first met them in the Rebels cartoon, they just were like, all right, these are Sith-like bad guys who aren't actually Sith because at the time we were supposed to believe that there was no Jedi left essentially. I mean, Graham, we knew there were plenty of Jedi and we keep finding out apparently there were ridiculous amounts of Jedi.
So many. Yeah.
It's a big universe.
If you met a Jedi and learned their name, they probably survived Order 66 somehow.
Yeah.
With a few exceptions that we saw killed on screen. But so it seemed like a lot of them still made it, but there was that idea of like, well, wait a minute. So by the laws of the Sith, Vader and Palpatine should have been the only two because there's only two at any given time, Sith Lords. But then we have all these Inquisitors who clearly are also Force, dark side Force wielders. Where did they come from? And we got a little bit of context of that in the Obi-Wan series.
And Ahsoka a little bit.
And a little bit in Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And now finally this kind of, again, like, because I think it had been hinted at enough that these were also previously Jedi who essentially were turned away from the light side. But I was also curious about what does that mean? Was that done by force? Was it people that were already teetering on the brink? Which I think does kind of give you some interesting context of, and I think we'll get into this a little bit when we talk about the Acolyte, this idea that the Jedi were not the perfect people they've always been portrayed to be.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of what Star Wars has been trying to do, kind of, and I'm not going to call it revisionist history, but filling in the gap and explaining why the Jedi were not this wonderful force for good that everyone tried to make them out to be, that they're just as fallible as anyone else.
Flawed as
So I think that kind of helps out with that a little bit, understanding like, hey, it wasn't probably that hard for Vader and the Emperor to take some former Jedi and say, hey, if you want to survive, you can join us and you still get to survive. You just got to start doing some pretty evil stuff now. And a lot of them were like, all right, I guess I can do that. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll join. I'll change. I'll leave this one cult and go join another one. It's no big deal. I can do that. So,
Cult transfer. Yeah. Just put it in order for me.
It's like, what do they call it in college football? The transfer portal?
Yes, the transfer portal. That's right.
There is a forced transfer portal.
I'm still force sensitive, right? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Cool.
I've decided to leave the Jedi and take my talents to the Sith. I'll take no questions at this time.
And get paid more.
Yeah, there you go. And get paid more for it. what if the benefits are better over on the Sith? Who knows?
Oh, man.
All right, so I think that's enough about that. All right, but now let's get into the Acolyte because I feel like this is something we've all actually watched and have some thoughts on. So the Acolyte was a now short-lived series set, was it like 1,000 years? No.
Yeah.
Was it 1,000 or?
Yeah.
100 years.
100 years, my bad. It wasn't that far back. Okay,
Yep.
100 years before the events of Phantom Menace.
Yep.
Where the original prequel trilogy begins. It's the height of the Old Republic, the High Republic era.
High Republic.
There's a whole series of books and comics and stuff exploring this era right now, and a lot of the characters in the show were pulled from that. So this is a time when the Jedi were at their peak of their powers. They were essentially the police force of the galaxy, which they kind of leaned into that a little bit as being like a little bit questionable of like where do they get the right to go off and decide who can and can't do the things they do. And basically we have a show that it basically becomes a murder mystery where someone starts hunting down and killing various Jedi that we find were all part of a previous mission to a planet where there were a group of Night Sister-like witches who were practicing their own version of the Force. And they basically kind of went in there to shut them down and tell them, hey, you're not allowed to do that.
Yep.
The Force is only for us for some reason. And things turned out very badly. A lot of people got killed. And now someone is hunting and killing off the Jedi that were involved in that particular mission. So we have a big murder mystery. We got a new Dark Jedi. I'm not going to call it not a Dark Jedi. Dark Force user. Not going to fully call him Sith because he didn't want to commit to being Sith either. Called the Strangers, and mostly I was referred to. What was his name in the show? Chimere, that's it. Played by the wonderful
Manny.
Manny Jacinto.
I have the list up here, so that's why I'm not just like full of knowledge.
Jason from The Good Place. For those of us that watch The Good Place, the doofy Jason who was a fantastic character on that, which I loved seeing him be this like very dark, sinister, serious, cool character after seeing him be such a complete like bubble-headed idiot in The Good Place. That was some good casting there. So, okay, this show had plenty of Jedi, plenty of lightsabers, lots of lightsaber battles.
It did.
Introduced a whole bunch of cool like martial arts style fighting into these lightsaber battles. But unfortunately, the show was not very well received. We'll get to the fan backlash stuff in a moment. But more importantly, it just didn't have high ratings. Apparently, viewership fell off quite a bit after the first episode or two, and Disney ended up making the decision to kill it and not renew it for another season, even though it kind of ends on a bit of a cliffhanger note and even randomly brings in the character of Darth Plagueis, one of the most epically discussed but never yet seen characters in the history of Star Wars.
The ending, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it gave us weird little love triangles.
Yeah.
It gave us, again, Manny Jacinto's character, the Stranger, who, got a lot of fans all riled up for his muscular arms and walking out of a bathing pool. It's an interesting cast of characters. I mean, these are all, a lot of new characters. I mean, we got a little glimpse of Yoda. I mean, the spoiler alerts, as always, for the show. We got a glimpse of Yoda at the very end that never really came to fruition or won't come to fruition. Mm-hmm. But again, this was a show also that got very, very much plagued by a lot of negativity in the hardcore side of the Star Wars fan base that I've mentioned on this show before and in our previous episodes. And granted, this is not this. Let's put aside whether you like the show or not, because we'll talk about that. But it was very disappointing. There was again a lot of like just hateful rhetoric happening online because there was a lot of cast members of color. There was the main lead character is a woman. People were very upset about that for some reason. There's a lot of stuff people were just trashing about the show and causing problems that had nothing to do with whether the show was actually good or not, but just people just getting mad because, I don't know, people existed that they don't like to exist for some reason. Let's put that aside, because unfortunately that's what drove down, we were talking before we got online, Rotten Tomatoes, like the audience score is awful for the show. But if you're someone that actually pays attention to that stuff, you should know that Rotten Tomatoes has become pointless for the fan ratings because people just make fake accounts and go on there and review bomb shows that they hate, even if they've never seen them, just to make them look
You would think
bad.
they would police that, or at least try
I think they've tried, and they can't.
Like
they can't
verify your identity?
Not enough mods in the world.
Let's bust out the blockchain on it,
Right?
And it's probably just something
There's
in
technology that can solve that.
If anything, like to put a whole bunch of security behind, I guess Rotten Tomatoes is not a high priority. Let's focus on securing like our banking information, and the stuff that really matters.
Yes,
and not,
that's fair.
Maybe
That's
not a random review.
Well, there's still the editors' reviews, right? So
yes, there was critics' reviews, and the critics were much kinder to the show. It did in general, even amongst fans that are well intentioned, have mixed reaction. So on that note, I'm curious from you guys, and Dean, maybe I'll let you kick this off since you haven't had much to say so far.
Yeah, I may not have a whole lot to say because I found the whole thing kind of slow. I think we talked about this when it first came out. Yeah. For me, who's not super in-depth into anything in the Star Wars world, is really slow and hard to follow are the two words that we coming out of the gate, it got a little bit better, I think, towards, I forget the episode.
It was like episode 5 when they had the big epic lightsaber battle.
Yes, maybe. So I had to go through all that to get to that. And you told me, no, hang in there because it gets a little bit better. I'm like, okay, yeah, but I don't know. So for me, it was like, just that it was I was trying to pick myself up into where the story was, what is going on here, why are we doing these things. It was a little bit confusing for again I'm calling myself whatever, the outside a fan, novice. Novice fan,
maybe not a novice, maybe you're more like
whatever. It was slow and hard to follow, but after episode 5, the night, I think that is the one. So the last few were good, right? I felt like maybe I was catching up a little bit. Now things started making sense. I made a little bit of sense about why we're at, where we're at. I did have to go back and watch them though, to kind of get there. So I don't know. So anyway, there it is.
Did it leave you wanting another season? Are you disappointed that we're not going to get more of this show?
Yes, in the sense disappointed, I guess, because I think there are some holes still left in the story towards the end there that there could have been more to dialogue there. Right. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing, like part of the endings with, again, when wasn't there the whole scene where you've got what's the one guy you were just mentioning? Well, he dies obviously, but
Saul, the main guy. Yeah,
I wasn't satisfied with that. I feel like there's more, and maybe there's more to explore there. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just the whole thing was like
you wanting more, but also didn't leave you like, oh my god, I'm so disappointed. This
right?
Is not
Yeah. But I have a feeling I don't know the in-depth story quite like you guys do.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. I haven't read any of the High Republic stuff, so I don't know a lot of the background context for this era myself. And I'll let you get yours here in a moment, Sam. But I did enjoy the show, and I would have liked to have seen more. I will say maybe it's because I'm just at the point now where like my expectations are low for shows getting renewed, and like I feel like the bar is so high for a show that gets renewed now. If it's not another clone of Law and Order or CSI or NCIS or whatever it is that's on network television, then you just have to watch a show that if you like it with the expectation that you may never see more than whatever you're watching right now. Yeah. And so I guess from that level, I wasn't too upset and disappointed, but at the same time, I did really enjoy this. Like I outside of The Mandalorian, this has probably been my favorite Star Wars series.
Okay.
Not counting the animated stuff. Yeah. And Andor, my bad. It's sad I forget about Andor because Andor's kind of feels so far in the rear view.
Yeah.
At this point, but in Andor's, I feel like kind of like almost exists in its own world.
It's like
because you could take the Star Wars out of Andor and still have an amazing show.
Yeah.
Whereas you can't take the Star Wars out of like the Mandalorian and the Acolyte because that it is part of the show. Whereas Andor, I think, is just a great show that just happens to be set in the world of Star Wars of sorts. But Sam, I'll let you jump in here. What are your thoughts on the Acolyte?
I loved it. I have thought a lot about it because I think, initially I was really upset that it got canceled just because, the drop of Darth Plagueis and then with May following Chimera and then going off to study the dark arts together. And, just so much of like my understandings being confirmed where the Republic was really corrupt very early on when like, they kind of just settled Soul's death with like, oh yeah, well, he did something wrong a long time ago. And, that's just how it is. And he didn't make it. So we're just going to shove this under the rug because we're perfect and we don't want any, speculation. They were already getting a lot of like, why are we funding this religious cult from, the Senate? They were already like pushing
political intrigue.
They were like, is this really like something we want to be investing in? And I really liked how that was just like starting to roll the ball into like Phantom Menace because we see so much of that in that early season. And yeah, I know it was very slow for a while, like, but it was very politic oriented, very like, very segmented into the different parts of the Jedi religion, if you want to call it. But then, the more I think about it, I'm like, well, maybe, and because I think like, I keep like comparing this to other forms of media, like maybe that was just enough context clues we needed to be like, oh, okay, cool. Then 100 years later, Phantom Menace happens, and we start to see this corruptness starting to like infiltrate this league of people. So maybe that's just all we needed, and then
just to see the crack.
Yeah. Like we don't need because sometimes I feel like, and especially just in other things. I was talking to John earlier about how I had just seen Wicked, and they're putting it into 2 parts, and I hate that because I'm like, no, we don't need additional parts, and the latter part's going to be like adjacent with. Like Dorothy and everything. And I'm like, what? Everyone knows the story of whether it's, we don't need additional content to like help feed us that. But then I guess, like it's a money grab, but it is what it is. And, if it just the educated viewer could be like, okay, cool. That was plot filler for me. I don't need an additional season to fill in the next 100 years to get me to Phantom Menace. I'm good. So that's kind of how I feel now. I respect
we got
it.
enough to, and let's be honest, I'm fairly confident that we're going to see some kind of a follow-up, like in a book or something.
Yeah.
I mean, they're already doing this whole book series around the High Republic.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason at this point why you wouldn't have somebody be like, all right, let's finish the story from the Acolyte, and because there's going to be enough people that'll be interested.
Is there an animated series that comes out of this? You think?
Probably
not. But I could see it being books. I could see maybe you do a couple books that wrap up this story because the bar's a little lower there. Like you don't have to justify a $600 million budget or whatever the show may have cost or whatever I think I don't remember what the estimate was. I think I read an article. The estimate was that every second of this show cost $630,000.
Oh my God.
Which is a big part of the problem here, where if you don't have enough people watching, they can't justify the cost.
Yeah. Did it really cost that much?
It was an expensive show, yes. This is one of the more expensive Star Wars shows they've made.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks fantastic.
It looks there.
Fantastic. You can tell where the money was spent.
For sure.
But maybe that's also kind of part of the problem now is, and I think I'll touch on this a little bit later when we get into our final closing thoughts. But for me, I'm wondering if the stakes are so high for Star Wars at this point that it's making it difficult for this stuff to succeed. So maybe, you put out a couple books of this and the diehards that love it will go out and read the books. You sell a few 100,000 copies and that more than justifies the reason why you made those books potentially there. And I don't know, maybe it renews some interest in the show and people go back and start watching it again or whatever. And you find a way to shoehorn some of these characters into something else. I don't know. I mean, overall, again, I like this show. I thought it was very well done. I thought the cast was really cool. I liked the different kind of vibe to like how the Jedi fought. I like bringing in a little bit of that Korean / Hong Kong action kind of stuff, that which made things a little more fun and exciting for the battle sequences. And this is also where my question is, what do Star Wars fans want? Because they watched all these other shows and said, no, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. Why aren't there enough Jedi? Why aren't there enough lightsabers? We're like, all right, let's give you a whole bunch of Jedi at the peak of their powers. Let's give you a dark villain who might be the coolest Sith since Darth Vader.
He was pretty cool.
I mean, it's just a very cool, the helmet, that ridiculous.
I was going to say, do you have the helmet?
No, that's a cool helmet.
Can you get that helmet?
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm
With
sure.
the teeth?
I'm sure that helmet.
Does it do voodoo to you when you put it on?
5 seconds after that episode aired. Let's be honest. Which apparently that's also some Jedi lore that's deep from a book that I had just finished reading. About,
really?
I can't remember the name of the metal that is in there, but there was I know
what you're talking about.
There was a book that I one of the later Thrawn books from Timothy Zahn that's like much later in the Star Wars timeline, like post Return of the Jedi, and there was some kind of metal that Luke and Mara Jade, who's completely unknown to anybody outside of the expanded universe. I cannot believe Mara Jade hasn't made her way into
I know
the real universe yet.
But that was doxed. That was not. It's like that's not canon anymore, is it?
Mara Jade? It's not. That's my point.
Yeah.
I'm amazed she hasn't been resurrected yet.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sorry, nerd moment.
That one's for the actual Star Wars nerds. Anyway, there's a part where like they encounter this like rock that has some kind of metal in it that like shorts out their lightsabers, basically makes them much harder to use. Yep. And I think that was the same metal that was being used in his helmet or whatever. But I mean, you had to love those fight sequences. I thought that stuff looked pretty cool. You got a real interesting expansion of what was going on in the Republic at that time, what other Force users were out there and what they were doing. Apparently, these couple witches may have created out of whole cloth two sisters
out of nowhere. Yes,
that's great. I heard some people being like, "How is this even possible?" I'm like, did you guys not watch The Phantom Menace? Like, basically, they told you that Anakin Skywalker was created out of nothing. Like,
it's also fantasy.
He had no father. Like he was the Jesus of Star Wars essentially. Right. So like it's already been established that this is a thing.
This can happen.
So yeah, I mean, and granted, to your point, Dean, you're right. The show started a little slowly. It is a slow build. I think it's fascinating because they just did it with the new Skeleton Crew series that just released, where they put out 2 episodes to start. The Acolyte started with 2 or 3.
That's a classic. That's a classic Disney move.
I thought it was at least 3.
It's happening a lot more lately, and I feel like to me that almost says like, then should we just be doing full season drops again? I understand why they wanted to go to the week by week model because they wanted to build this excitement and people discussing and talking about
viewership.
And that's great when you have a show that people are so pumped about that they're there from the beginning and stick with it and week to week are having a conversation about it. But that I feel like it's hard to know when that's going to happen.
Yeah, I feel like
if you drop a whole season, maybe it's a little easier for people to binge it and be like, maybe you're not as upset when you have to wait 5 episodes to get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
When you get through those 5 episodes in a week. And not 5 weeks.
And not have to rewind. What was it? Yeah. So
tough.
Tough
so
call.
I get that criticism because you're right. It is a little on the slow side of her. Honestly, I felt the same way about Andor. Andor felt very slow for a while, and then when it hit its groove, I was like, this show is absolutely amazing. So maybe do we need to be going back to the full season drops for these things in order to make people give them the time?
I like the week by week. I think it builds hype, especially if you have an episode or two that's just like drops a real big cliffhanger, and then you're like, oh my god, I have to wait until next week. Oh, millennial problems. Gosh.
But I guess that's it though, because if you're
you
going,
gotta keep the cliffhangers.
right,
You gotta keep
if
them.
you're gonna do the week to week, you either have to commit to having some real interesting stuff that gives you a cliffhanger and brings you back for the next episode. Or you've got to put out like a batch of them that gets you to that point in some way.
Yeah.
And I think the problem with that too then still becomes that unfortunately there's just so much content out there that maybe people go, if I'm bored in the first episode, I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm back over to
Think of all the
Netflix watching
competition.
something
Absolutely.
else. Yeah. Like, hey, the Great British Baking Show's on. I'm gonna go check that out instead. You know,
Or
like,
even anything in the category. I mean, there's a lot of competition out there.
like I don't think this isn't just a Star Wars problem. I think this is
Especially at those
streaming
dollars that you
platform
just
problem.
mentioned. I mean, to produce this kind of, oh my lord.
Yeah.
I mean, that's movie budget.
Yes.
That essentially
Absolutely, that's a
you're
movie
creating
budget.
what is essentially sort of a trilogy of movies that you're splitting out into a series at this point. So
I mean,
I don't know. Marco, do you want to weigh in on this, buddy? I know you had some thoughts on the Acolyte. What's your opinion here? Let's hear from the man behind the mic.
Yes.
oh, no.
Oh, he just threw his arms up.
I don't know where to start because I disagree with you about the whole the twins being born sporadically. If that shouldn't be that common in my mind, right? Like,
Right.
It's one of those things like that's what made Vader special.
Ah.
So if now we can just do that in this universe,
True.
do we just go around and keep doing
Spawning. We're just spawning.
I mean, hey, it is a way to to help out with population, I guess. If you have concerns about that, or
I agree with Dean. I thought the storytelling was mediocre.
Yeah.
Kind of slow. I didn't love. There was nothing that really like made me grip onto the story.
Yeah. It was hard to follow. Yeah, right.
And one of the big points for me is you had a Wookiee Jedi.
I do agree that was a missed opportunity.
Gosh, dang it! I wanted to see that so bad.
I absolutely do agree with that. As soon as I was like, Wookiee Jedi, I want to see that. I mean, we got
he was killed off
very brief
Yeah.
glimpse of him battling in the flashback,
Yeah.
but not enough,
I
man.
needed at least one episode of that guy just screaming in a Wookiee language and going to town. Yeah. That's all I needed from that. I would have probably changed my mind about that. Had that been
So
the
see,
case.
what do Star Wars fans want? Now
There it is.
We gave him epic lightsaber battles, all kinds of Jedi fighting, a big fight scene, but nope, we didn't give him enough of a Wookiee fighting, and now they're upset again. So
Jedi Wookiee.
there we go, Jedi Wookiees. I feel like eventually we're going to hit on it. At some point, we're just going to have like, it's going to be just like a 3-hour movie of just every freaking kind of Jedi you can imagine just running around battling each other for 3 hours straight. That's it.
I mean, yeah, that sounds awesome.
Who's standing at the end?
Jedi Gladiator.
Mace Windu. Who else?
Oh, yeah.
Mace Windu,
Yeah,
so
right,
everyone
right.
survives. All right, well, that does it for the Acolyte. Then I do recommend checking out the series. I think it is a good watch, and it is worth your time. I think it's probably a show that probably works a lot better as a binge than it did in week to week, most likely for a lot of folks, I would imagine.
Not to go down a rabbit hole, but just give me the highlights of why it was canceled, because I wasn't
Essentially,
into the whole.
it was here's the thing. Disney,
What was the main
Disney
complaint?
officially will not say. Which, of course, then that's what unfortunately spurns a lot of people on the internet to say, like, well, it's because
it's because of this.
It's because there was 2 black women in the show, or it's because they, cast an Asian guy in the show, or it's because
Did it have low viewership? I mean, is there?
that's
okay.
really what there was an article I actually was looking this up today and be like, all right, has anyone given a definitive answer on this yet since the cancellation? And there was a Forbes article I found from a couple months ago where a guy was like, had talked to someone inside, like from the inside of Lucasfilm, who essentially said, really what it came down to is this was
Viewership.
a very expensive show, and the viewership was very low and kept declining from episode to episode. So unfortunately, it just didn't do what it needed to do.
But since they didn't officially come out with that, now everybody's up to speculation
Speculation.
of why. I got you.
Right, exactly. That's the
And then
problem.
that's just gonna run rampant.
Because that's not, and even then, I think even if you did come out and say that, people were going to say like, well, the reason why no one was watching was because of all these things that I
see. I gotcha.
And again, I'm still of the belief that in general, the majority of Star Wars fans are good fans who appreciate what they get. Maybe you like some stuff, maybe you don't, but you're not out there spreading hate everywhere necessarily. I just think the toxic fan part of the fandom has become very, very loud and obnoxious. And unfortunately, it's become so loud and obnoxious that people are starting to think that they actually have influence over what's happening in the world of Star Wars. Maybe they do. I don't know. I would hope that no one at Disney or Lucasfilm is going on YouTube and watching all these videos that are just spewing nothing but hate for the sake of spewing hate on something that some people will admit, I didn't even watch this, but...
Yeah. But it leaves the door open to more conspiracy because as we kicked off the show, what is the show doing? Where are we going with all the right? Where's the next movie? Where's the next
right?
So that's just going to feed into that.
It kind of is, yeah. So and there was also something interesting this article pointed out too, which that Andor, by the same token, probably shouldn't have had a season 2 either, but they negotiated for that up front. Up front, the creators of Andor said, we have a 2-season arc, and we will only do this if you commit to both seasons. Because Andor had very low viewership too. I don't think it was quite as low as the Acolyte, but apparently like its viewership was not anything spectacular either. And there are a lot of people, I mean, because I'm sure there's a lot of even hardcore Star Wars fans that are just like, what is this show? It's slow. There's no Jedi in it at all. No one's even using the Force in it, I don't think. Like, what are we even doing here? And yet, critically speaking,
that's what Marco said.
It is probably the most critically acclaimed Star Wars
thing
Marco
since
like
movies.
Andor?
I thought Marco.
Marco, did you like Andor? Yeah.
I think in general, most Star Wars fans did like Andor.
I thought it was
overall.
fantastic.
But it is also a very different kind of show.
It
that is not what again would be in the
typical.
Mold of what,
yes.
If you told a Star Wars fan build the perfect show, Andor would not have been it.
Right.
I think it is a perfect show.
Yeah.
But it's not the show people would have built. So I think we're lucky that we're getting the second season that we are of that.
Yeah.
And maybe that should be a path forward for future producers and creators in the Star Wars realm, is basically be like, hey, I'm going to do this thing for you, but I need a commitment to being able to tell my complete story my way. But I feel like that only will get to happen to maybe some of the top talent that has that kind of clout.
Yeah, for sure.
That could potentially get that. And granted, I mean, I know Tony Gilroy is pretty well known in Hollywood. I wouldn't have expected him to be someone who had the clout to go to Disney and say, hey, you're going to give me 2 seasons of Andor and you're going to like it.
Maybe that's what they need. They just need to be told.
Someone needs to set that mouse down and tell them what's what.
Yeah.
They're like, listen, Steamboat Willie, you're in the public domain now. You answered us.
He is in the public domain. That is true.
All right, let's talk a little bit about what's next for Star Wars, though, because that is also a very interesting topic of conversation. So,
yes.
On the streaming side of things, there are stuff that we know is definitely happening here. So as I mentioned, as we're filming this, yesterday, the first 2 episodes of a new series called Skeleton Crew, which stars Jude Law and a bunch of kids, and I know almost nothing else about it because I don't watch trailers anymore, really. That came out, released yesterday. We'll talk about it next year because I'm sure it'll be running into January before it's finished as well. I believe it's set during the Mandoverse time.
Oh.
I think so.
Yeah. We also
you sound ho hum already.
I don't know. I just because I think there's a bunch of force sensitive kids, or maybe not. They're maybe not force sensitive. I'm just not certain of the timeline. I was telling Chris last night. I feel like so much of the stuff I watch, I literally need like a map to see. I'm like, when did this take place?
I think we're getting there.
Well,
and I think that's part of the downside of the casual viewer. But go ahead.
Did you read? You read all the expanded universe books, right?
I've read High Republic. I've read like 6 of those, and I've read the Timothy Zahn.
So the old Timothy Zahn trilogy may not have had this, but there was when they kept expanding out and doing there had to have been 60, 70 or more books that came out, filling in the space of everything after the original trilogy. There was, after a while, they started at the beginning of every book. When you opened the book up, there was a 2-page spread of the Star Wars timeline. Nice.
Yes.
And it told you where every book occurred. It was like, the defining moment was the Battle of Yavin. So it was so it was like BBY before Battle of Yavin or after, or there was after Battle of Endor, or ABE, I think, or something like that. So basically it was like telling you, like, here's where this story took place. Like
that is nice.
Instead of BC and AD,
right?
It was before the Battle of Yavin.
Contextually, it helps the viewer out.
Yeah. And you had
just
to,
so I can,
if you wanted to keep up and understand, like, all right, the book I'm reading takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi. Okay, now I understand. This book now takes place 10 years after Return of the Jedi. Okay, now I understand where it takes place in the context of
like, are Force-sensitive kids safe in this timeline?
Right,
I need to
exactly.
know. Because if they're not, then, like, run.
And especially because after a while, like, the books were, like, bouncing back and forth. Like, some of them were taking place further down. Some of them were jumping back to tell a story between the Thrawn trilogy and Return of the Jedi. Some were doing stories in the midst of the original trilogy.
Did you? I mean, if you wouldn't have had that, what would you do? Put it in a spreadsheet? Like, how would you be? How
I don't
a whole wall in your bedroom devoted to this, so you can just start
red yarn,
red yarn everywhere.
Yeah,
it's like it's like a cold case we're trying to solve here.
Gosh. No,
I keep seeing Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Pepe Sylvia.
So then the Rogue Planet was 15 years before the Phantom Menace, and that connects down here.
Maybe we could make $1 million making this.
These already exist.
I'm sure
there are plenty of spaces.
I'm sure there's fandom somewhere
to find timeline and chronological order for stuff. But it's a little convoluted, yes. Yeah. All right. We also do definitively know we're getting a second season of Andor in April of 25. Again, I'm pumped for that. That show. I do want to go back and rewatch it again.
I'm gonna have to.
I feel like I didn't appreciate Andor enough at first when it came out, because I remember watching at first and again kind of feeling like this is a little slow. I think that's one where, because there's 4 arcs in it, right? 4 3-episode arcs, or is it 3 4-episode arcs?
4 3.
I think. I think that would have worked so much better had you just released those arcs as clumps. Like, give me the 3-episode arc, then make it a special event like a month later, the next 3 and the 3 after that, or something like that. Because that was a show that week to week did feel like a little bit of a slog, because some episodes are very character driven, very narrative driven. And granted, I liked it, but I think the problem is sometimes when you go into a Star Wars show, your expectation is that you're going to have a lot of exciting stuff happening.
Exactly. Yes.
And while Andor does have a lot of excitement to it, the excitement came kind of at the end of each of those arcs for the most part.
Yeah. So you had to wait 3 episodes to get there.
I look forward to going back and rewatching this. I have a feeling it's going to make me even more hyped up and more like, man, this show is amazing. It's got some of the best writing I think we've ever seen in Star Wars by far. Yeah. It also makes me appreciate Rogue One that much more.
Yes.
Like, I still... Maybe one of these days we'll get around to re-ranking Star Wars movies again.
I love that movie.
That's my favorite Star Wars
movie. But I'm very much inclined to put it at number 2 after Empire Strikes Back. Empire Strikes Back would be number 1 until it will always be number 1. I can't see anything ever knocking it out.
Sorry, not sorry.
I think it's just because it was the perfect time and age for me to experience a movie like that. You know?
Yeah.
But Rogue One, I think, is the closest you get to that kind of like just really meaty for a story that no one really was asking for,
right?
And that we all know how it was going to end, and yet such a good movie.
Story, yeah.
But Andor makes me appreciate that even that much more. So I'm really curious if the Andor, because this second season is the last one. I'm really curious if it's going to end with like right where Andor appears and picks up in Rogue One. Like, am I going to finish Andor and immediately be like, let's go watch Rogue One? You know?
Yeah, probably.
As like when you finish Rogue One, you're like, let's watch A New Hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's cry.
Like literally. Yeah. The ship.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Star Wars Visions. We supposedly are going to get a season 3 of that next week. If you recall this is the like anime inspired, non-canonical short stories set within the world of Star Wars. Some of which we
like those.
Yeah, they're fun. They're it's one of those things like
it's like bubblegum.
I think because of the fact that it's not canonical, like it doesn't have to have anything to do with anything else. It's
a different bar
recreations, and yet could be stuff that does fit into the Star Wars realm. Makes them fun to watch. You know? It's like the
anthologies.
Are they going to approach it the same way? Didn't they have different?
Yes, it was like different studios making them. So I think that's the plan there. Now, supposedly Ahsoka season 2 is still on the docket. We don't have
to be released in 25.
No, that's probably not until 26 there. Yeah. But it's supposedly still in the works, and the expectation is that we are going to get a season 2 of that. Mando season 4? Don't know.
If there's a movie, if there's a 2026 movie, why do we need another season?
Right, which is so that brings us to the next part. Let's get into the films here, because right now the only movie that seems likely to come out is The Mandalorian and Grogu, which I still think is kind of an awful name.
It is a bad name.
Is that the official name?
Yes.
Naming the two characters.
It's
I didn't realize
that. The Mandalorian and Grogu.
No, that's not going to go well.
There's so many better names.
I almost wonder if they might test it and rename it sometime before that. because again, they haven't officially there is a May.
This one feels like a merch grab.
Disney has
It probably is.
Disney has a Star Wars movie slot for May of 2026.
Okay.
They also had two other Star Wars movie slots for 26 that now are probably not happening. Because again, they haven't started making anything.
If we rewind 3 years ago, it felt like we were going to have a movie in 25 for sure.
We were supposed to have had a movie for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, what Rise of Skywalker was 2019? I think
Maybe earlier than that.
I
Rise of
think it
Skywalker was 2019. Yes, it was right before.
So we're going on 5 years
of
without
no
a new
movie.
Star Wars movie. Now, granted, I know
a lot of content.
For those of us old school Star Wars fans that waited 26 years,
This is nothing.
for a new Star Wars movie and didn't even know we were ever going to get more Star Wars movies.
That's true.
This seems kind of piddly.
Yeah.
But in the age of the super franchise where Marvel's releasing 5 or 6 movies
I
a
think
year,
we debated this at the time. With all these other releases, why do you need a movie? Do you need a movie? We were asking ourselves.
That's a very good question. Yes, and I think that's kind of where Disney and Lucasfilm still are. They're
I think so.
We know we should do movies because the movies make a lot of money, but what do we do? And to that point, again, we've got this Mandalorian and Grogu movie that seems like it's happening. Jon Favreau's directing it. I would say it's I'm going to call maybe a 70% chance that it makes it to the theater right now. I mean, I think they started filming something.
Is it going to pick up right after where season 3 ended, or are we going to? Okay,
presumably, I don't know, and because initially I thought this was the story that we were leading up to that may have had Thrawn stuff in it, but apparently this is not related to what's been going on in Ahsoka or the other Dave Filoni stuff. We'll get to that in a moment. So all I know is
now I'm even more confused.
All I know is we are theoretically going to get this movie, and I do not know if we're going to get another Mandalorian season after that. Or
it's just Mando and Grogu.
Right. Okay. Now, so in a moment, I will run through the litany of other projects that may or may not happen or were supposed to happen and haven't. But the most recent announcement is a new announcement came out of Lucasfilm and Disney that a new episode 10, 11, and 12 trilogy has been announced. But these are not officially going to be Skywalker Saga. So Star Wars is back. The Skywalker Saga is not. These are being helmed by Simon Kinberg, who, if anybody's familiar with him, he's done a lot of stuff with Marvel over the years, did a lot of stuff with the X-Men franchise before Fox got bought out by Disney, has been heavily involved in a lot of other projects. Someone who is a known franchise type guy and has some cred with good writing, interesting stories and stuff that he's come up with over the years. But apparently he is being given the keys to another new Star Wars trilogy that now is potentially going to be labeled episodes 10, 11, 12.
Okay.
But also they're very firmly saying this is not part of the Skywalker saga. To which I say, then why are we calling it episodes 10, 11,
Yeah, what
12?
else? What are we?
good point.
What are we doing?
If 1 through 9 was the Skywalker saga and everyone involved in it was a Skywalker in some way or had some connection with the Skywalkers eventually,
Yes.
why are we doing another trilogy with the same episode? But is it just because we think maybe people will come see this if it's
Part of the
if it sounds like we're continuing on?
Well, what are we?
Is this just a marketing thing?
But what are we
this?
doing? Who is? I read the article. It sounds
There's
like it's,
obviously no.
there's
details.
nothing in it.
Yeah,
I was
but it
breezing
said
through
maybe the unsung heroes of the resistance. Okay, cool. What are they resisting?
I know.
I'm sorry.
Because presumably this is after the fall of the resistance.
Everything's good.
Yeah.
We're
good.
We're firmly in the New Republic age again. It's rebuilding.
Yep.
Yeah, it's another big bad just rose from the dead on the third day. What?
Somehow Vader returned.
Yeah, what in the world? What is happening?
Well, that's
I don't know what story you could tell that would make it somehow part of the greater saga, but yet also not be because we've talked about this before that I think I firmly said I'm done with Skywalkers. I'm okay.
Yeah.
You have said that multiple times. Yes.
Even though I do admit, I love seeing Luke pop up in the Mandalorian and stuff. That's been fun.
But that's
I'm not gonna. It's one of those things I say I don't want this, and then as soon as Luke pops up, I'm like, it's Luke. Yay!
But that's not that's he's dead. He's dead. But
that's
that's not
true. Yeah,
that was
Mark Hamill is still
the
firmly
timeline.
alive, and may he live forever.
Yes,
but.
he will live forever. But the timeline that was then where we're thinking now. So the only Skywalker is Rey. If we want to believe that she was a Skywalker.
That's
so
a Skywalker in quotes. And
quotations.
we're not saying that because we hate that there's
no,
this girl.
it's just no, come
It was
on.
an
Like,
awful ending. To the
biologically,
series.
that's not her last name. So it's just like there's no more Skywalkers. Like what? What?
Right. So again, that's the point. I guess if you're going to do more, it really can't be a Skywalker saga because the only Skywalker that's left is not a real Skywalker,
Yeah.
unless we're just going to find a random.
Oh
I don't
my
know,
God.
like, hey, I'm Luke Skywalker's uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters,
Yeah.
which makes us absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Like unless we're doing something like that, I don't. That was a Spaceballs reference for anybody that got that, by the way. I don't know what you're doing. Like I don't. Again, I almost feel like it just sounds like a marketing ploy to be like, hey, you know that Star Wars that you came and saw plenty of times.
Remember
before?
those trilogies? We got more.
You know how you love those. We're doing it again.
Just let it
We
die.
don't know what it's going to be, but we're doing it again.
For the sake
So-
of good storytelling, just let it die.
So we don't have hope that they figured this out?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
Got it.
And
Yeah.
let's give a reason why. Because you might have forgotten some of the various Star Wars projects that have been in the works.
Oh, boy.
May or may not still be in the works. Let's talk about all the things that have been in development over the last few years.
Okay.
Since the end of the sequel trilogy.
And prior to this announcement, obviously. Go
Yes.
ahead.
At one point, the Game of Thrones guys, the Weiss and Benioff or whatever, they were supposed to get a Star Wars trilogy. That went by the wayside, probably shortly after they were exposed for saying how much they disrespected and didn't give a crap about Game of Thrones fans. And, we're just there to make some money to go off to get other projects.
Yep.
Rian Johnson, director of The Last Jedi, the divisive Last Jedi, was supposed to get his own trilogy. I guess that's no longer happening. I haven't heard anything about that. Kevin Feige, I just heard Marco shout good. Kevin Feige of Marvel Cinematic Universe, the architect behind the Marvel Cinematic Universe, was supposed to get his own trilogy.
Yes, he was.
Stay in his lane.
Let's talk about some serious double dipping there. Yeah,
Yeah, really.
that I guess is no longer happening. Some projects that still may be in the works that were just announced, I think, at last year during Star Wars Celebration. A Jedi Academy film that stars Daisy Ridley as Rey. So obviously post the sequel trilogy.
We talked about that last time.
Yes,
Go ahead.
that's supposedly still in the works. I won't believe it until I actually have a ticket in hand and sitting down in a theater. Taika Waititi of What We Do in the Shadows and the last two Thor movies fame. He supposedly has a Star Wars film in the works. Again, never really heard anything about that. James Mangold, known for Logan, and what else did he direct recently? The most recent Indiana Jones film. He was supposed to be doing a Dawn of the Jedi film, like set thousands and thousands of years back in the earliest, how the Jedi came to be and how the Sith came to be. That supposedly is still happening, maybe. And the only one that I still feel like is probably going to happen is Dave Filoni's conclusion to the Mandoverse. So supposedly he is going to make a movie wrapping up everything they've been doing with The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, maybe Skeleton Crew, all this other stuff that he's been kind of executive producing. My theory is that this is going to be the Heir to the Empire trilogy compacted into a film, or at least borrowing elements from that. I think because he's obviously a big fan of Thrawn, he brought Thrawn into live action. I'm pretty certain he wants to do something big and epic with Thrawn. So I think he's going to do his version of that story, that trilogy of books.
So is that different from the Mandalorian and Grogu movie? That's two separate things?
That's where I was confused, because for a while I thought the Mandalorian and Grogu movie was going to be this kind of like Heir to the Empire, which is also why I was like, why are we giving it a stupid name then? If that's not what it is. Heir to the Empire is a much cooler name.
Yeah.
Assuming that's what they call it. I mean, I know, Ahsoka said that term or whatever in the series.
Yeah, but I'll die on the hill that I really think that Mandalorian could have just been 2 seasons.
Yeah, we all kind of agreed the last season was just meh.
It was
Just fine.
Yeah.
I mean, look, as always, my caveat is you put something Star Wars out, I'm going to be there.
I mean, yeah.
It's not going to, probably nothing's going to stop me from seeing all this stuff or watching all this stuff. But I'm very dubious. Oh, hang on. I forgot. There's still 2 more. Supposedly Donald Glover wants to take what was going to be a Lando miniseries and turn it into a film. He still wants to play Lando again in a movie. And Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron movie is apparently still not officially dead, even though it got postponed indefinitely at some point. So that's it.
Holy moly!
It's entirely possible there's something else that was brought up at some point that I've forgotten about or couldn't dig back up. But that's all the stuff that's been announced and is either
who's steering the ship?
Already gone.
The mouse.
Disney?
I guess.
Yeah, the mouse.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what's happening. Bob Iger, is he back in charge? He's the one back in charge of Disney now, right?
Yeah, he tanked it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, and the funny thing is, like, because actually we'll get to that in a moment because that's part of our closing thoughts here on this here. Any thoughts on what's coming? Like, are you guys excited for anything that we definitely know is coming out? Are you excited for Andor? And,
of course.
For Andor, but I think everything else, I'm just like, all right,
Yeah. Again, I'll be there. Sure, I'll be there opening weekend.
So when's Ahsoka going to come out?
We don't know.
Probably 26, but we haven't.
I got a long way to go.
Because and I guess that's also why it seems unlikely that Mando and Grogu has anything to do with that, because
they're on that planet.
My assumption would be you'd have to have season 2 of Ahsoka and bring them back to the main galaxy in some way to then have this final epic, Filoni Mandoverse movie. Which, here's the other part of it too. Also seems to imply to me that it's going to have to end with the resurrection of the Emperor.
Just, I don't know. And I know there's different projects. Like, I'm just going to say.
For anyone listening to the pod only, I just sat here staring blankly at the thought of that.
I know they're separate projects, but it's just, the way that we all felt when we were like gearing up for Endgame and like the Marvel universe. And I was like, oh, all these people are going to come back and there's going to be this epic fight. And I'm so excited. Like, I was amped about that forever. And now it's just like hearing about they're going to do something kind of like basically almost similar with like the Mandoverse. And I'm like, just why? I mean,
it's kind of like, because I don't know about you, but I feel the same way about the upcoming Avengers stuff.
Yeah, no,
because the Marvel Cinematic Universe has become so meh since Endgame.
Yeah, right.
That even though they're going out of their way to promote this new 2 movies that are coming. I mean, went out and freaking got Robert Downey Jr. to play Dr. Doom apparently, which is
no, I'm not excited. I'm not.
It's like, again, I will be there, but I'm also not expecting much. My bar has been set as low as it can be at this point.
I've lost the plot. I don't know. I just I don't know.
All right. So unfortunately, we're ending this year's Star Wars coverage on a little bit of a down note because it's just not as excited or as pumped for what's happening in the future as we should be.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it in a moment with some final thoughts on the world of Star Wars right now. But before we do that, instead of our usual end of episode stuff that we do, we have a special announcement to make. This is our last episode of the year and of this season of the TEConnect podcast.
Yes.
And technically, it's the last episode of the TEConnect podcast.
Yes.
But hold on.
What?
Before you panic, before you start sending us mournful, emails and recording videos and putting them out on the internet of how saddened you are by this.
Don't send the flowers just yet.
I don't think anyone's doing that.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
Or any edible arrangements.
Yeah.
Hey, you can send an edible arrangement.
You can still do that. Yeah.
Just hit me up. I'll give you my home address for that. Actually, those are only good for a short amount of time. Send me a gift card or something instead. I don't know. Send me some cookies. Cheryl's cookies. There we go.
There you go.
That's the way to my heart. Yes. Anyway, point being, we are rebranding
we are.
TEConnect podcast to the BlueStar Nation podcast. Or more appropriately, probably just calling it BlueStar Nation for the most part. Now, if you're wondering, why are you doing that? You guys have been at this for 4.5+ years now.
Yes.
Why are you changing the name? Well, if you know anything about the back end of BlueStar and the stuff that we do, our TEConnect program has been, for the longest time, for always has been, our program about ISVs. And bringing ISVs into the reseller channel, helping introduce them to vendors, helping them leverage them into business, helping them introduce them to VARs and make connections and incorporate software into the channel because it's so important to our channel, obviously.
That's right.
But that's not really what the podcast is about. We do talk to ISVs. We talk a lot about software. We're big proponents of that.
Yep.
But, our podcast is much more about, in general, the whole entire channel.
That's right.
How we all work together.
It fits better under BlueStar Nation.
Right. And BlueStar Nation, if you've been following that, has been our, our content hub for lots of really cool stuff we've been doing. We've been taking like deep dives, education and surveys.
That's
and just trying to bring you good, useful content to help you build out your business and learn more and grow your business also. So we figure, hey, that's pretty much what the podcast is about too. So maybe those two things should actually have the same name. We did agonize about this a little bit.
We did. Yep.
We knew we probably wanted to change the name.
Yes.
And I think once we've decided BlueStar Nation, we've we felt pretty firm about that pretty quickly. Yeah. We felt good about that.
Feel good about it. We still got to figure out some of the details.
Yes. We do have a lot of details to figure out. As of this recording in early December, we have yet to plan out exactly what this is all going to look like. So that means we will be going on a little bit of a hiatus. We usually do this time of year anyway.
We do.
Might be a tiny bit longer than usual while we're getting all of our ducks in a row to relaunch as BlueStar Nation. But keep an eye out for that. If you are a regular subscriber, nothing you need to change. The same feed that if you listen to podcasts, nothing's going to change there. It's going to drop on YouTube. It's going to be in the same playlist there. Nothing is going to change other than just going to see a new logo, name change, a little bit of bells and whistles and stuff and tweaks change there. But to that end, as always, if you have ideas for the show, if you're thinking, hey, while you guys are rebranding, here's something I'd like for you ideas to change. And if it's replacing me and Dean, sorry, you're out on that one.
But anything else is up for grabs.
We'll replace Marco if we have to. Fine.
100%.
No, we can't do that. Behind the scenes stuff is
studio.
Yeah, there you go.
See?
So if you got ideas for the show, topics you want to hear about, things we think we should be doing on the new BlueStar Nation,
now's
recommendations for guests, and not just because you're some random podcast company that tries to drive business.
Hey, we can grow your.
Yeah. Like we get a million of those emails all the time.
Serious inquiries only.
Serious inquiries from actual people who listen to the show only, please. So, as always, send your ideas to us. For now, you can send them to TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. That email will probably be changing at some point in the future. So, for some reason, you do try to email that and get a bounce back. That email will still exist.
It'll still work. Oh, yeah.
So, TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. But obviously, we have a new email at some point in the future. But hey, send those ideas into us. We want to hear about what you want to hear about on the revamped show. And again, look for us to come back strong sometime in 2025. Did you have any final thoughts on that?
You know what that means, though. Now we need a new shirt. Marco.
We do. We need a new shirt. And it also means that we have a plethora of our last TEConnect podcast shirts laying around.
I see a giveaway.
I want to find some fun ways to give that away. Yeah, I think we should get the rest of those out there.
There you go.
So it's because at this point now it's going to be like a collector's item.
Right.
Like, look, I have a T-shirt from a now defunct
trophy
podcast.
Case, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Shadow box.
That's right. All right, let's wrap things up here with, I kind of had a final question for you guys about Star Wars. And if it hasn't been obvious when we were discussing today, Star Wars is a little bit chaotic right now. It's a little bit disorganized. There's no real movie strategy at the moment. The TV show strategy feels a little sporadic too. And obviously now we've even reached a point where shows are getting canceled, which not something I really expected necessarily to happen. You know, it's one of those things, it's such a juggernaut. You don't expect a show to actually get canceled with Star Wars right now. So has this taken the shine off of Star Wars for you? Are you as excited about all things Star Wars as you maybe were the first time we did this 5 years ago?
Me? Yes.
Yeah.
No, it has not. I'm sorry. Continue on. I think it's being overthought. And here's my argument. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it is time to do more movies and things of that nature. There's so much, to your original point, there's so much to explore within the Star Wars universe.
Right.
Is that what we're going to call it? That, I think that from a casual viewer type of a situation, we're getting older. We remember, obviously, the original trilogies and stuff like that. There are people coming up behind us. The brand and what it builds and some of the storylines, quit overthinking it. There's still a lot of shine left in the Star Wars brand and what it brings and the feelings and the emotion and all that kind of good stuff. Right. So I would advocate, no, it hasn't lost the shine. Maybe we just, I would just, there shouldn't be the serious side. I'm not saying that, but there's a lot of good left in there. And people are suckers for good stories, good production. That's what it's all about. That's what lured people in to begin with. Right. Keep doing that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I don't think the shine's off too much, but if they kept going down that road, for me as more of a casual, still love consuming it.
Yeah.
As you've all admitted, right?
Well, good. That's actually good to hear. I like hearing that someone who is a more casual, that's not like deeply immersed in all the lore, is still like, I'm still on board with whatever
I'm on board.
comes out.
I'm going to go watch them. Yeah.
There you go.
Anyway.
From your lips to Disney's ears, I hope you understand. Like, hey, you know what? The casual fans, they're still digging it.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I was shaking my head no initially because I don't think the shine's gone anywhere. I mean, I do think I'm not as excited for I feel like I've gotten let down a little bit on movies, on the movie category. I don't really expect anything anymore. So just when people say there has been a release or an announcement's made, I'm like, okay, like we'll see it when we see it.
It's very dubious at this point.
So I don't know if I believe you, but with all the shows and stuff coming up, right? It's just plot hole filler for things that I've been wondering for years. So and just narratives that I feel like have stories that need to be told. So. No, I'm very excited for Skeleton Crew. I'm very excited for Andor season 2. I'm just all forms of media, books and shows and however else they want to communicate that to the masses. I will be consuming it. So I'm just not as optimistic about a movie. But then again, I go see movies, but I don't know. I won't bank on it because I think. At this point, everyone's just confused.
Yeah,
what they're gonna do.
I think they're all confused.
They are too. Yeah. Right.
Marco, what about you? Are you still a Star Wars guy? Or are you feeling a little more
shineless?
He's a little split on the thought here.
I'm disappointed. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what to point it to or how to articulate it necessarily. The shine is gone
right
now. I think it's mostly from storytelling. What is it just me, or do you ever feel like back in the day we used to go books, comics, something, and then we'll do a movie, and now it just feels like, hey, let's do this movie or this TV show and throw it out there and see if it sticks.
Right.
I feel like you've lost your way of finding out if this is going to be good or not. And they maybe need to.
That is a good point. Yeah. Well, it's like I mentioned earlier. They're obviously pulling a lot of stuff from the old expanded universe Star Wars books, which tells me that stuff was good. That stuff that did resonate with people. I mean, there was a reason why they put out so many of those books. I mean, that was a publishing force for most of the 90s, essentially.
It was well-written content.
Yeah, they got really good authors. They had really cool storylines. They had the blessing of Lucasfilm to move forward and and tell a full ongoing narrative that, I mean, they encompassed the next 30 or so years, I think, after Return of the Jedi, and really told a very full-fledged, full fleshed out story after that. And now we're suddenly starting to see all right, well, let's grab that and bring it in. Grab that and bring it in. Again, the hardcore fans that read a lot of that stuff, there's some of the stuff they bring in sometimes that someone will mention, that was in the expanded universe, and I hadn't even heard about it yet. Like the end of the first season of Ahsoka, when they were talking about some of the weird rogue Force user thing or whatever, I can't even remember what it was called now at this point. Abeloth? No, it wasn't Abeloth. Was it Abeloth? Was that his name? Maybe, I don't remember. Something that the guy who was I'm reaching this point where I'm forgetting all the characters' names. The Jedi that Ray Wise played. He finds that giant monolithic statue, or whatever, at the end of the first season of Ahsoka.
Yeah,
and that is apparently some.
Well, that gives Rebels vibes,
Well, yeah, but there was some deep lore from the books apparently about Luke coming up against this ancient dark Force user or whatever that had been trapped on this planet from years ago or something like that. Stuff like that. They're digging really deep into and pulling stuff out. So clearly, the people that are making this stuff. Loved those books, grew up with those books, are fascinated with some of the stuff that came out of that. So, to Marco's point, there was good stuff being done that we're now using. Is that
part of why
could that help if we step back? And I guess in some ways you could say the Acolyte was an attempt to do that, because they've been building out this whole High Republic thing for a few years now, where it's hey, here's an entirely new era of Star Wars that we have not explored. Let's put out a bunch of books, comics, video games, all kinds of stuff related to it, and then we're going to make this series. It's also said during that period, but then the series tanks. So I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, I agree with you guys. I'm still a Star Wars guy. I mentioned several times. I'm still Star Wars.
We don't cut it off right now and just let what has been produced live in infamy, as the work.
Here's the problem. There's no way that's going to happen.
Right.
We've unfortunately we've reached peak franchise for all different kinds of franchises. I mean, we're dragging stuff up. I mean, we just put out Gladiator 2 in the theater. We're trying to make a franchise out of a 20-plus-year-old film that was a great movie, but no one actually was at the time sitting like, man, I can't wait till Gladiator 2. I can't wait for the Gladiator cinematic universe. No.
There
was no one asking for that, and yet we're still getting sequels and expansions and potentially trying to. Everything is an attempt at a franchise these days, which I don't know. I'm a sucker for franchises. But at the same time, there's sometimes I'm like, not everything has to be a franchise.
That's why I'm saying you could rebel. You could no longer watch anything more that's produced from here.
That's
moving
true.
Forward.
And unfortunately, hopefully that's not what's going to happen. But I guess my thing at this point,
we're not there.
We're
yet.
Obviously a little bit rudderless. And maybe
I think that's what's contributing to the loss of the shine.
Yes.
It just seems rudderless.
I think Lucasfilm / Disney, whatever it is, could use what Marvel has with Kevin Feige. And while I do agree that the Marvel stuff has gotten a little bit off the rails. I think they had a perfect plan up to Endgame and have not really had a good plan since. Which is also a reason why maybe that should have been stopped and reset for a while and bring it back later. But again, this machine says you've got to keep doing it.
For sure.
It's making money. And I guess until people stop going to see this stuff and stop watching it and it's no longer making money, they're going to keep doing it. But what I wonder is maybe the answer at this point might be to start getting into some lower budget stuff. Like making stuff that doesn't have the high stakes, especially on the streaming side. Like don't put, and granted, maybe this is tough to do in a Star Wars where people expect lightsabers and spaceships and amazing sound effects and new worlds and aliens. But is there a way maybe we dial it back a little? I mean, I kind of feel like Andor a little bit.
Don't you feel like they're going to come out with, when's the first Gen AI Star Wars?
Please no.
You know it's going to happen.
That's when I.
One of those.
Is that when you stop?
Maybe maybe one of those vision shorts. But the moment that there's an actual film,
yes.
I mean, come on. This is why.
Okay, mark the date.
This is why Hollywood
Mark
just went on strike, is to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen. But honestly, I think that would actually be a terrible idea for the franchise. I just don't see why people would care at that point.
Yeah.
Like, give me a well done animated film that took 6 years to put together, like the Spider-Verse stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
Fine. If you want to do that, but don't make something that AI is putting together in a weekend or something. Like, come on. But I think honestly though, I think there is a potential for maybe some interesting low budget stuff.
Yeah.
Like instead of a $200 million project, what about a $50 million project?
Exactly.
What about something that had like a budget like the original Star Wars, where it's mostly practical effects and you got to rely on just interesting actors and a really good story. And it still exists within Star Wars, and you sprinkle in a little bit of that magic stuff there or whatever, the stuff that we love to see, but it doesn't have to be whiz bang from beginning to end. It doesn't have to be a bunch of actors standing in front of a green screen for
as long as there's lightsabers. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think at this point, probably lightsaber special effects is probably pretty cheap. It's not. I think people can do that, like at home on their own, own computer at this point. So.
Marco, is there a lightsaber filter?
Yeah,
there
see?
is. Yeah, see,
Marco
Adobe Premiere has it. Yeah,
that's probably easy enough to do. So
easy.
I don't know. I think I would like to see something like it. Maybe get some like legitimate filmmakers, give them small budgets, and say like, hey, go have fun in the Star Wars universe, create something, and we're not going to care about what the fans think of it. I mean, the hardcore screaming fans. We don't care if it conflicts with something. Let's just do something that's fun in this world and be done with it. I know that probably won't happen, but I guess
good luck trying
bad
Disney
idea.
that.
Yeah,
really.
I know exactly.
Disney, the king of everything.
It's one of those things where Disney came in and like there's a part of you that's like, man, now we got Disney money for Star Wars, and then you also go, but we also have Disney in charge of Star Wars.
Disney expectations.
Yes. And we talked about this last year. I think the reason why we haven't seen a new movie is because you put one of these movies out and the expectation is that it's one of the top 10 films of all time.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's supposed to make it has, if it doesn't make $1 billion plus, it was a flop.
Yeah.
And how that's impossible expectations. You put those kind of expectations on a film and you're basically setting it up for failure because you have to basically say like, this has to be so big and so expensive and so full of whatever that it brings in all kinds of people to see it, whether it's good or not. It's people are just gonna want to see it because they want to see it. And it has to be this giant spectacle. We can't tell an intimate story. We can't have a romantic comedy set in the world of Star Wars because it's got to make $1 billion,
Well, yeah, but our world has changed.
It has,
right?
True.
I mean, the streaming universe is, I don't know that we can accommodate these mega
I don't know.
stuff. It's tough.
we say as Hollywood just had one of the biggest Thanksgiving weekends of all time.
Yeah, but what is it? Wicked,
Moana 2, and
Moana 2.
Gladiator, yeah. So yeah.
It'll never beat Barbenheimer.
No,
that's true.
Yeah.
But that's just it. I feel like we're at this point where you get maybe 1 or 2 clusters of like big movies every year, and that's it. And again, I feel like we're trying to create all these giant tent poles for these franchises and be like, I mean, it's like when you look at like the release schedule, like people plant their flags. These studios plant their flags for movies.
Yeah, but I think there's
6-7 years.
There's
in
your telltale sign that they're not. They don't believe that they can do what you.
Well, that's the problem. They're planting
set.
their flag and they're saying in like if you look forward on a movie schedule somewhere, like they'll tell you like in 2028 that like there are 3 Disney Marvel films and like 3 Disney Star Wars films, and then like 4 Disney animated films that already have dates scheduled. But then what'll happen is a year or 2 out, they'll suddenly go, we got to move one of those because either it's still not filmed.
I think the bar has moved. Disney's only concerned with people not canceling Disney Plus.
Yeah,
that's true.
So they have to produce enough content to keep enough people subscribing to that. That's the new bar. That one way to read this would be they're not going to do a huge launch. So I have no expectation now that we've had this conversation that Mando and Grogu is actually going to happen.
Yeah, I think
they're just kicking the can.
That could just be a placeholder
Could
and
be.
just something to keep us
Could be.
whatever.
Maybe
string us along.
One theory would be, or one tactic would be, shut it down for like a decade, and then see what it's like, and then
think about the hype for the prequels. Now, granted, the prequels didn't live up to the hype, unfortunately, but
then we'd be like close to retirement.
True. But think about that.
Look at that Star Wars.
Think
baby.
about when you heard in like the mid '90s that George Lucas was first of all making special editions of the original Star Wars trilogy. Which to me, I loved that. I was like, oh hell yeah, I get to go see these in the theater again. Sweet. Yeah. And then word comes out, he's also making a brand new trilogy. Like we were out of our minds with excitement. And then we went and saw them, and they were basically like cartoons with a few actors running around.
They did their best.
I know you're more of a prequel apologist than I am.
Hate on Hayden Christensen.
At the time, that was some pretty good CGI.
But anyway. The time, we were all. I mean, again, I'm not going to lie. I went and bought tickets for the midnight showing, and I watched it 4 times the first day.
Sounds like a fan.
Obviously, I was on board. I had waited 20 plus years. I was on board for this.
Yes.
So maybe you're right. Maybe there's something there. Man. Maybe we just shut it down. Nothing Star Wars for years. I can't see that ever happening.
Yeah.
I can't
Too much of a moneymaker? I don't know. At least with the Disney Plus.
I can't see Disney just sitting there and going, we're just going to let this property simmer for a while.
Well, no, they got a whole park. And they've got a lot.
They have IP other places.
That's a good point. So, all right. Well, hey, that does it for us for our Star Wars coverage for this year. Hopefully we'll come back next year with some more fun and exciting stuff to talk about. I mean, we know for sure we're getting 2 series at least to talk about for next year. That's pretty much going to be it. There were no of them. By the end of next year, if the Mando movie is definitely happening, Mando and Grogu, we will know by then. We'll probably have a teaser trailer.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, D23 happens in like August next year. So
there's going to have to be something firm by then for 2026. So we'll have at least some kind of, or we'll be having this same discussion again of why can't Disney get their Star Wars together?
Check the tape. Yeah.
That's right. So, all right. With that, we'll leave you guys. We'll be back sometime next year with the BlueStar Nation podcast.
Yes.
Looking forward to coming back. Stay tuned. Send in your ideas. We appreciate hearing from you. Thanks again, as always, for following the show, for watching the show. Give us your feedback. We appreciate you. Sam Hughes, Marco, thank you guys so much for weighing in and joining us.
Absolutely.
On today's episode. We'll do this again next year. Yeah. Even though the podcast name may change, Star Wars will never die for us.
That's true. Yes.
Even if we get those like gaps, like if there is like a big gap and they don't do Star Wars for like 6 years, we still have to do this and just, I don't know. We'll find something.
Reminisce.
We'll come in with like our favorite like Star Wars recipe or something.
A watch party.
Or we'll do like watch parties and like we'll do one of those things where you like watch like a minute of the movie and then break down that minute and watch
react.
the next minute. Yeah. Do a
Old people react.
Yeah. We could do our own version of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yes, I love that idea.
That would be fun.
That's a fantastic idea.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Happy New Year. May the Force be with you. We'll see you next year. TEConnect Podcast is brought to you by Elo and the Elo Pay M100, which offers the ultimate rugged enterprise-grade mobile point-of-sale tablet in a slim ergonomic form factor. I like that dichotomy there.
What?
Rugged, enterprise-grade,
Yes,
but
slim.
slim and ergonomic. Well played, Elo.
Well played, yes.
Boasting a 10.1-inch FHD scratch-resistant touch display, integrated payment with PCI PTS 6.0 pin-on glass. I don't know what that means, but I'm sure it's awesome.
No, that's good stuff.
Flexible Android 12 OS and Qualcomm SD660 processor. The
Zippy fast.
It is. The M100 Pay combines powerful performance with the security, unified architecture, and the lifelong life cycle that businesses need. Try saying
Easy
that
for you to say.
5 times fast.
Right?
Lifelong business cycle. 6 sea snails sneezed on the seashore. And the sad thing is, I'm writing this myself. I can't blame you. They didn't give me weird copy here.
It ain't me.
I did this on my own. I was my own villain here. The M100 accepts payments from anywhere, includes integrated cameras, has enough battery life to cover a shift, and can go from mobile to fixed with a rotating POS dock to swivel from merchant to customer facing. I always enjoy that. If I'm in a restaurant or a retail store and they swivel thing around for me to sign and say whatever.
Yes. It feels so modern.
It does. It just feels cool.
Sleek.
Yeah.
And
also feels like I'm kind of doing some of the work too, but whatever. I'm going to need you to put your card in here, tap that, do this, do that.
Hey, wait a minute.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to stand here and smile. To learn more and see additional specs, check out the link in the show notes or contact the BlueStar Elo team. Discover seamless transactions with the Elo Pay 22-inch integrated payment solution based on the iSeries 4. This versatile and user-friendly self-service platform ensures effortless interaction, transforming every transaction into a smooth and engaging experience.
Smooth and engaging.
Yes. This new model of the Elo Pay features a 22-inch FHD 10-touch display, integrated NFC, Android 12 with GMS, a Qualcomm SD660 processor, again, mega fast.
There you go, mega fast.
8-megapixel autofocus camera, and scratch-resistant glass. Of course, Elo's well-known modularity allows you to mount, configure, and customize the Elo Pay 22-inch to fit any application with a universal Visa mount and Edge Connect attachments for up to 3 peripherals. To learn more and see additional specs, check out the link in the show notes or contact the BlueStar Elo team.